Who is Sumala? Well, let's find out with the IMDb plot. Sumala, a name that is feared by people in a village in, I'm not going to say the name because I'm going to butcher it, but we'll just say a village. From the past until now, no one dares to go out when night falls because Sumala will come to kill, all right? All right, so we're trying not to butcher too many names and whatever, blah, blah. And why? Because this is an Indonesian film, so, that might be why there's some a word or two that's hard to pronounce here, so we'll just bypass that altogether. But let's see, this is a fairly new movie. I'm not sure exactly when. It's on Netflix. I'm not sure exactly when it landed on there. A movie that I'll tell you guys that, was again just kind of scrolling through the names on Netflix and was just kind of like, okay. And then, the preview kind of starts and it's kind of like, oh, this is an Indonesian film. I like Indonesian horror. They do some good stuff. They do some crazy stuff. So I'm like, why not? Let's go for it. And here we are. So, yeah, I guess, the story from what I understand is kind of like, based on almost like an urban legend or maybe kind of like a bad fairy tale kind of thing. And that's the story of it. And I guess that's the story of where they came up with this and definitely the story in this village and so forth. So the basics of it, I may not have gotten it all and so forth, but are that I guess they're a little bit more well off than maybe some of the other people in this village or whatever. Or at least that's what it appeared. They are a couple and they want to have kids, but they're struggling at it. And the wife apparently does something she probably shouldn't have done, and in order to kind of help her get pregnant, and she eventually does and has gives birth to twins, and in the process of giving birth, Sumala, one of the two that she gives birth to, doesn't make it in a way, and the father does something pretty cruel here. But yeah, and I'll leave that to kind of you guys to see. And so there's only one of the twins left, and one of the twins to kind of grow up. And the young girl who grows up is maybe a little bit disabled, a little bit mentally challenged, and so forth. So obviously that's going to make things tougher at home between the parents and raising her, and then tougher when she eventually goes out in public and goes out in the village and so forth, and obviously with classmates and that kind of thing. So part of the story is definitely about bullying and so forth. That is definitely one of the angles here. Obviously, another angle is kind of being mentally challenged and disabled, and kind of trying to overcome that, and then the harshness of even in this different situation. It's not maybe the situation that many of us are in. This is a small village, but similar kind of things going on here as far as bullying and so forth. Obviously, things that are kind of said at the beginning. Like I said, the mom did something she shouldn't have done, and then the father didn't kind of help in the situation. So once the one sister who lived, I guess, gets to a certain age or whatever, and starts really getting the brunt of the world, even from home and home, as well as those in the village. Kamala comes to kind of her aid and to kind of like take her over in those moments where, she needs to be strong and just can't. So that kind of leads to the horror of the situation. And, early on, you see a child that dies, and that kind of sets the stage of panic in this village. And then later on, more and more bad things are going to happen. And then, eventually, soon enough, people are going to figure out that it is because of what these twins and what the parents have done. And now the sister, who is now being taken over by her dead sister to do bad things, if that makes a little sense. Um, so the main reason why, it's very hard to act, to kind of discuss the acting and whatever, because it's a different language and so forth. So I really can't get into, acting and whatever. And the story seems kind of familiar. We've kind of seen some stuff in familiar that's kind of similar to this. But I think the big difference and the big reason why I'm here talking about this and encouraging you to watch this film, especially if you like Indonesian horror and you're kind of familiar with it now. We've seen a couple of things on Shudder. I know Netflix has not been afraid to kind of put other Indonesian horror films on there. I've not seen them all, but I definitely encourage you to catch, some of them. There's just a little bit, they just do horror a little bit different way than we do, or at least willing in certain circumstances to push that envelope a little bit more, especially when it kind of gets into the supernatural. They get a little crazy. So I can definitely appreciate what they do. It's a little surprising what they do. Like I said, the father does something a little that I don't think you see many times in films that we typically watch. Early on, when the mother gives birth to the two twins. Later on, you're going to see the sister, when Kamala kind of takes over, do some really bad things to other kids in a situation. And again, in many of the horror movies you watch, it's very limited, what kind of violence happens to kids. And I'm not saying, here we should have violence for kids in horror movies, whatever. But there are times in horror movies that we're watching, you think that, if the story was true to itself and true to the horror, because it's horror, we would see, more extreme things happen. But because, we have ratings and this and censorship and that and this and that and the other thing, they kind of glance or maybe assume it or just don't do it. And you just don't. And, sometimes you may see it in a festival film where they know specifically that, it's not going to hit theaters and not going to get a huge thing. You might see some stuff that you don't typically see. But on the most part, there are things that are left out that we don't see. But this movie doesn't miss on it. She does some bad things to these kids, and you get to see the bad things to these kids. You can argue, well, it's kid-on-kid violence, so in a way it's, not okay, but okay. Hate me for whatever. But it's really within the story, and it's not a thing where you just say, oh, well, she's here to haunt, and, she pushed the person and we don't see it, and, they fell over the cliff, and, we assume, oh, the poor kid, he went over the cliff and died. No, she's just like we see in any slasher movie where you see the slasher grab someone, stab them, kill them, whatever. They're dead. She's going to do the same thing. It's a kid, not a, baby or anything, but, it is a kid, and, that can be rough to watch, whatever. But it's not ignoring of the fact. So, it's kind of just interesting to watch and see, and that they go ahead and they do that and so forth. So, if you're ready for that, you're not ready for that, maybe you don't want to see that, you're like, hey, what the hell does he want me to watch that for? Whatever. I just think it's interesting that they go there and that they show that, and we just don't go there, don't show that. And you guys know that I'm in for the blood and guts and whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I mean, it is horror. So, it is part of the story. So, okay. Hate mail now. Anyway, I think that's interesting. I think, she does go after adults too. And, I think there's no shortage of it. There's some, really creepy moments in the film. It gets a little wild at the end. I think, some of these Indonesian films that have a supernatural element, they get a tad wild at the end. And, you might think it's over, but it's never really over. So, even if you can bypass the kid thing or whatever, if you can get to the end, I think there's, a little bit more fun there. And no, not kid violence at the end. Adult violence. She progresses as the movie gets on. It gets a little bit worse, and then eventually, she really takes hold, and it's not really the young innocent sister anymore. It is more this demon spirit that's coming out and doing the bad things, and really comes for revenge, for being the sister that is now dead and left for dead, and so forth. So in a way, you kind of feel bad for the supernatural spirit and so forth because of, being the twin that didn't survive, and you'll see what happens at the beginning. So you don't, maybe totally blame her for what happens at the end, maybe some of the stuff in between. Again, she's defending her sister, and so forth. So, maybe they deserved it. Again, I'm not, advocating death, but, sometimes bullies get what they deserve. So, when, they're bullying her and all of a sudden the evil spirit takes over and starts kicking some butt, you feel completely bad. Maybe you weren't waiting for the death scene to come, but, and you maybe argue if some of those kids really died or not. I don't know if they just got injured or died. I don't know. But regardless, we're just not, we don't typically get to see, that kind of action with the kids. So, but yeah, I think there's a good creepiness here. There's some definitely good kills and deaths, outside of the kid. I keep, let's just stop with the kids. But, there's some good stuff going on in that kind of realm as well. So, I think, again, that's along the lines of the other 8 Indonesian horror films. I think this is another one to like and enjoy. If you're kind of seen some of the other ones and enjoy it, I don't see why you wouldn't like this one as well. So again, this is on Netflix, and I encourage you to disregard all the kid stuff I talked about and just like the film for, being kind of dark and creepy and spooky and giving you some other good kills and so forth. It's a good kind of urban legend for them. And then, like I said, we've kind of seen that before. But I enjoyed the movie regardless. So I'm going to give it 3.5 pools of blood. And just, again, I just can't help but like some of the, not that every one I've liked, some of them are definitely strange, and you can kind of get lost in some of the translation stuff. You're not either following, I don't remember if I saw this one a little ways ago. I don't remember if this one was subtitled or we had the voiceover on it. I don't remember. So sometimes you kind of get lost in some of that as well, and I know that it's hard to either read, or even when it's being translated, it can be annoying at times. So it's not always for you and so forth. But definitely, if you're kind of looking for something, in a little bit different area and a little bit different in the way they do things or whatever, this might be one for you. So I'm going to give it 3.5 pools of blood, and that is out of 5. So horrorsquarereviews.blogspot.com is where you can catch all of my reviews written in videos, certainly mostly video ones for a while now, so you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody wants you to do, or not. I appreciate for your time regardless, and you might hate me now for whatever, so you might unsubscribe, whatever, I'm sorry. Twitter, Facebook information down below, so you can unfollow me there, and in the comment section you can put all the hate comments you want. You think I'm crazy there as well. I apologize, but it is what it is. So with that, I'll catch you on the next review, horror fans.